Kia ora koutou. Welcome everyone to this SPADA Masterclass series. So this series is about sharing the knowledge and the skills and the resources that we have across our screen sector industry. And today we have an amazing panel who have very generously agreed to share their experience of making SIS the show and each of their involvement in that. I'm going to pass it over to Shuchi Kothari, who is our host for this session. And on behalf of SPADA, I welcome you all into this space, and I look forward to enjoying the conversation that will continue. Thanks, Shuchi.
Kia ora, Ness. Thank you so much. I'm Shuchi Kothari, as Ness said, and I'm so kicked. I'm really overjoyed to be hosting this panel, not just because I love the show, I also love the people who've made it, and very rarely do you get to kind of scan a panel and not feel, you know, whisper thoughts in the back of your brain saying, oh my God, I wish that person wasn't on it. So I'm so thrilled that you know, I'm with people I very, very deeply respect, and I look forward to how this masterclass unfolds. I'm a screenwriter, I'm the co-founder of the Pan-Asian Screen Collective, and I teach at the University of Auckland. And this is my introduction, and what I'm going to read out is a little poem, not by me, but by Alyssa Santikaran. My Etsy seller likes to call it a tassel bell-shaped Hindi, Muslim, Indian, Bengali, gypsy style, jhumka, jhumki, dangler, wangler, authentic ethnic earring. Fair enough, I guess it does make the point. I miss home and I tell Ammi, so I'm going to buy myself some jhumkis, like ornaments to wear as your history. You'd get them cheaper over here, she tells me. Ammi, they're only £2. Wow, that's a lot cheaper than you'd get them over here, she says. It's capitalism, darling. My dad's voice is heard somewhere in the background. The marketing tool is rich culture. The product is cheap material. Ammi and I roll our eyes in front of our cameras and he doesn't see us do it. I giddily send her a link to the tassel bell-shaped Hindi, Muslim, Indian, Bengali, gypsy style, jhumka, jhumki, dangler, wangler, authentic ethnic earrings. I wait for expected opinions. She'll say too big, too heavy looking, not really feminine. But she raises a grainy eyebrow at me, all the way from Islamabad. And she says, darling, beta, this isn't jhumke, it's kante. It's not earrings, it's thorns. And it's these thorns that have been co-opted, hijacked, changed, mangled, thrown back at the people who make this, wear this historically, has made me watch SIS so happily, so differently, that you don't know what it feels like when people who flip the burgers actually own them. And I'm so, so proud of you, Hanelle, and proud of this team, and welcome everybody. If you're scared, turn the webinar off. It's not polite, neither is SIS, neither are the people who've made it, but it makes it so exciting. So let's all introduce ourselves one by one, and then we, you know, get into the politics of the show. And Hanelle, do you want to go first?
Oh, kia ora tātou. I just want to acknowledge that, you know, it's not common for a teina, for a young person to go first, but, you know, time's of the essence, and we've got lots to speak of. Would like to start by just acknowledging, you know, my uri, my turanga waiwai. Ko o te maiwa te maunga, ko mahururoa te awa, ko piki te aroha te marae, ko ngā titoro te hapu, ko ngā puhi te iwi, ko Hanelle ahau. I'd also like to start by acknowledging my collaborators who aren't here, but who have been just as much of an integral part of this project and of its success, and in particular, my producing partner, Gabby Solomona, Destiny Mamoisia and Maya Thompson, my writing partners, and Lecky Jackson Burke, my directing partner. So I'd just like to really acknowledge that, you know, as we say, it takes a village to make these things, and this village in particular is one that I'm very proud to be a part of and to be representing today in our kōrero. Ngā mihi everyone, I'll pass it over to Annie.
Oh, kia ora, Nell. Kia ora tātou, ko Annie Murray tōku ingoa. My name's Annie Murray and I am the head of local content, Sky and Prime. So that's entertainment content, excluding sport. I'll hand over to you, Dana.
Talofa lava. My name's Dana Youngman and I am the Senior Commissioner at Sky and Prime, and like any entertainment programs, not sport. That's me.
I'll go next then. My name's Dan Morrison. I am a senior programmer for Comedy Central across Australia and New Zealand, and we help commission SIS with Sky. I'll throw to Karin.
You're muted, Karin.
The Zoom hell. Kia ora ana koutou katoa, ko Karin Williams, tōku ingoa. I'm Karin Williams. I had the privilege of being the executive producer of SIS. And how it all began was on a set about 6 years ago of a short film, a fresh short, which Hanelle was on the crew of. And sometime during the 3-day shoot, we had a conversation about where are all the young brown female urban voices on our screens? They weren't anywhere. We couldn't see them. We hadn't seen anything representing the next generation of young Māori and Pacifica women in particular. And 6 years later, here we are, because Hanelle and her crew went out and made it. So I'm incredibly proud of them and very grateful to all the commissioners who had the faith to back this project. And here we are today. So 3 cheers for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think before we get Hanelle to talk us through the journey, I think we should watch a little bit of something. So Danielle, are you happy to play us a clip?
Yeah, I hope it doesn't lag too much, but we'll see. I'll put it up now. One sec.
Criminals, great. Yeah. As soon as Baba came in, she had this raw energy that I was just like, yes, her, you know, who is she?
She can have tattoos, sir. She can have like
tattoos. Good.
Sir, I got a 685 Samoa tattoo. I'm gonna like start a gang with all 685 Samoa tattooed people, and we'll just sit outside my garage and be Samoan.
She's unmolded, you know, she's like a big clump of clay that I just want to get my hands into, do you know what I mean? So we're thinking ankle bracelet.
What? No one said ankle bracelet.
Can cut a bitch, man. This one can cut a bitch, you know?
Curfews. They look that. Yeah. My cousin's on curfew, so it's not that serious. It's the one before the bracelet.
I don't know.
It's probably the first time I've worked with a white man there, and he's really opening my eyes to some stuff. Like, he showed me like this. He just said, I need that push. I just need that push because I'm from a broken home.
I'm just going to put here while I think about it, dusky maiden.
No, Tom, you're perpetuating stereotypes here. That's why we're here, isn't it? We're trying to break those things down, right?
Yeah, but sometimes, you know, there's a grain of truth in all these things. Okay, what else have we got? Domestic abuse.
Yeah.
I think we could deal with that in a funny way. Domestic abuse.
Thank you so much. I'm sure most people in this audience have watched the show, but if you haven't, then this should be enough of a clue to why we've gotten together here to talk about it, why the show's done so well, and why it's got the accolades, the acclaim, and the warm reception. Hanelle, if you could kick this off with a kind of a little snapshot of how it all came to be, because obviously in the clip, it's so clear that, you know, your strong point of view of being a creative in this industry and what it has meant in terms of your journey, in terms of who was telling whose stories and why, and who was in the room, who was not in the room. All this gets condensed in this clip. So if you can just, you know, talk to that a little bit and the kind of making of SIS.
Yes. Annie Murray actually sent a really great article this morning that came out of Australia recently, 6 industry insiders on the TV problems with race in Australia. I hope you don't mind, Annie, but there is a passage, a segment that I just really like to start with that really just jumped out at me, and I think it really speaks to that through line in SIS that talks about the politics of the writer's room. This particular passage says, people of colour and Indigenous people often come out of writers' rooms feeling quite used, especially when they don't stay on the team in a significant way. When it's an all-white team calling the shots, it can feel like they are harvesting minority stories and minority pain. Tell us your experiences, your trauma especially. Yes, you might have been given a credit, but even that's a mixed blessing. The show could change significantly from when you were involved, and then suddenly you're being used as a shield to back up every creative decision, every problem, even the problematic ones. And I think that through line of SIS really, you know, we did want to explore and challenge what we believe to be the structural systemic racism that happens in the New Zealand film and TV industry. And you know, that's from shared common experiences of being the writers that have been asked to be part of these projects. And you know, as Karin said, we met back in 2014 on a short film, and engaging with Karin as a new filmmaker and Sima Urale. They were a big part of kind of, as soon as I stepped into the industry, uncovering this real rotting problem we had around story sovereignty. And so when we started talking about, you know, the inauthentic and misrepresentation of Māori and Polynesian women on screens in New Zealand, we knew that the only way that we were going to address that was to make it ourselves. And web series at the time, back in 2015, when I started with Baby Mamas Club, was not, you know, web series was just kind of over there a little bit, and there was money, you know, $100,000 pods that were going, and I was really inspired by what Roseanne Liang and the Flat 3 Productions girls were doing with Friday Night Bites. And I thought, well, if the end goal is to make a feature film, a Polynesian chick flick, then this might be the first step to that. So we applied, we got money to make Baby Mamas Club season 1. That was successful. We made season 2. And during that process, you know, I'm really good friends with all of the girls in SIS, the main 3, and I just started writing roles for my friends that weren't being cast. And in particular, Gabby Solomono, who's one of the leads, but she was also my producing partner, and it was about writing a substantial role that showed off her range. And SIS also was an opportunity for me to work really closely alongside Maya and Destiny, who weren't getting the opportunities to jump on these mainstream writing tables. And so SIS actually became our weekend project. We got together and we, you know, we literally got together at McDonald's Green Lane in the meeting rooms, and we got hot chocolates and we sat there for a day and we brainstormed. And initially we just thought it would be this online sketch series or skit type of kind of social media content. And what we did was, while we were filming Baby Mamas Club 2, we used half of a shoot day to shoot a pilot or a couple of pilot episodes. And with one of the pilots, we then went and just put it online, because it was actually our crew were saying, gosh, that was so funny, you should chuck it up. So we did, we chucked it up, and it had a really positive reception. And we said, hey, maybe we should go see if some platformers want this and some platforms want this. And so we went around, and we were you know, we were turned down by a couple who didn't think it was their cup of tea, which was particularly odd given the success of Baby Mamas Club and the fact that this was a spin-off of Baby Mamas Club. And so around the same time, this initiative, the Pacifica Asian initiative, had come out, and they were looking to fund a few projects. And through that initiative, we just thought, why don't we just go and pitch it to everybody? And we pitched it to Annie Murray and Dana and the team over there at Sky, and they liked it, and they said, well, have you thought about Comedy Central or MTV? And we thought, oh my gosh, television, you know. So we've gone from creating something that we thought would just be a weekend project actually designed to upskill young emerging brown female writers to now it was going to be potentially on television. And so yeah, from there, I mean, it was really the relationship and the warm reception that we received at that table on that pitching day, and we very quickly realized that this was a team we wanted to work with, and a team that was going to support us into our transition as we made it from digital to television. And yeah, here we are today.
Thank you. Not that this is your whole journey. I'm going to keep coming back to the creative process, but maybe this is a perfect segue to actually talk about that moment of the pitch, right? You said you took it to Annie and Dana, and they said not only were they very receptive, they also suggested other ways to make this bigger. So can we hear from both Annie and Dana, and then I'm sure in the way that you talk about it, Daniel will come into the conversation. So either Annie or Dana want to kick this off, but I would like to hear from both of you, both Annie and Dana, because you must have had some internal conversations after Hanelle left the room. And those are the lovely fly on the wall conversations that we don't get to hear in terms of a creative coming in with something and what you feel about it. So Annie, do you want to kick it off? And then Dana follows you.
Yeah, sure. For us, that pitching day was really interesting. It was a competitive environment for the platforms as well as for the groups that were pitching. And so we saw a number of groups that day, but we were really struck by Hanelle and her team, and just the absolute authenticity and realness of their pitch. And also we knew the experience of the team. You know, we knew that Hanelle had made Baby Mamas Club 2 series successfully. And there was also a sketch, as Hanelle mentioned, that had been shot, and it was really good. And for us, you know, we're in the business of taking risks, but we're also in the business of mitigating risks. And so when you see, we read a lot of props, and some read better than they end up turn out as in the finished product, and others are the other way around. And it's really hard with comedy, especially to read a prop and really visualize, and Dan, I'm sure, can talk more to this. But once we viewed that pilot sketch, which I think we'll check out soon, you know, for us, that's proof of concept that this could work. And so for us, it was pretty much a no-brainer. You know, we just had to convince a few other people back at head office that it should be done. And we also had an existing relationship with Dan and Viacom through Tiki Towns, which was a children's show we'd commissioned together, and had a really good relationship, and just kind of knew that Viacom would get it and Comedy Central would get it and would be a really good partner for it. So those things all added up for us really nicely. But Dana, you might remember more detail of that pitching day. You're good. You've got a better memory than me.
Oh, well, I don't know about that. But I think for me, the professionalism of Hanelle and Gabby really struck us, and the quality of their pitch, the quality of the idea. It was incredibly professional. So we got it. So the thing that we're looking for was also testing to see if someone can deliver on the promise of the idea. And it was very clear that they knew what they were talking about, and they were experienced. And, you know, we got really excited when we started thinking about Dan and Viacom and Comedy Central and what it could mean for Hanelle and her team. And that really inspired us to do our best on behalf of the project to see it through.
This is a weird and personal question, and I forget that sometimes in these webinar situations, you forget there's a whole audience that you don't know. You just talk to these, 5, 6 people that you're having a conversation with. But I am curious to ask you this what's going to sound like a weird question. Did you see yourself in Hanelle in any way? And this is an Annie Dana question, but I'm genuinely, we always hear of white men in positions of power constantly giving opportunities to young white men because they see themselves in those people in front of them. They see that's the younger version of me. They relate to them in that particular way. And, and we've always argued that we need to diversify the god-awful word, but you know exactly what I mean, people in power making decisions. So when all kinds of people stand in front of you, there is a different lens through which we look at people pitching, at people writing, people negotiating with authority and power. So I'm wondering, was this?
Well, it was wonderful to see 2 women doing what I do. Well, I was a producer and director for a very long time.
Exactly.
And to sit across from people who look like me was wonderful, because it doesn't, there aren't many of us. So firstly, that was great. But secondly, I identified 2 professionals. Yeah. That's what I saw. 2 women who were clearly talented and knew what they were doing. And that's what I saw.
And Annie?
For me, looking at Hanelle, I saw the young woman that frankly I wish I had been at that age. So brave, so strong, so sure of her message and her politics, and so sure of how to express that I was just blown away, actually. And it was probably an exercise in projection a little bit, and that I just wanted to be able to enable and empower that passion and that vision. And after all this time that we've had in the industry, Dana and I, collective probably 50 years now, to be able to use the positions we've reached to enable these young ones to stand on our shoulders, I think is a real privilege. So it was about then working out the politics of it, of the funding side of it, and the strategy to work out how do we actually get this to happen? How do we work with Viacom and New Zealand On Air? How do we work out a windowing strategy that's going to acknowledge that New Zealand On Air's priority is a free-to-air, free access content, while still giving Hanelle and her team that connection with a brand that has the mana, the global mana of Comedy Central. We thought that was really, really important. So then it became about the detail. It was the idea and the talent were done and dusted. We knew it was going to work. It was then about how do we make it work. Right. So that took a bit of strategy.
And Daniel, for you, of course, Viacom has a relationship with New Zealand local content, but for this particular project, SIS, when Annie and Dana got in touch with you and said, hey, there's something we'd like you to see, can you take it from there? What happened?
Yeah, so from our side, it was Annie and Dana coming to us with this project, and we had the pilot episode of SIS that was just a sketch basically that could have lived in the show or not. And that was really what gave us a taste for what this could be. We did have a document which told us what this series could be, but this was the kind of the flavor of it that kind of, fleshed out what this could be, which I think always definitely helps for anyone who is going into a pitch or something. Having something that is a flavor of what your show is, something visual that you can see, definitely helps those conversations when people are looking at a new project like this. And I think also for us as well, just seeing Baby Mamas Club as well existing and seeing what a great product that was, and that this could kind of live in the same world and have that same production quality and everything, but it's just on a different platform. I think that gave us all the confidence when looking at this to go, yes, these are some talented people who have produced a really great product already. We're getting a flavor of what this new product is and we're all on board. So that kind of made it a lot easier to have conversations on our side, having kind of that background there to kind of use to have those conversations as you speak to people higher up to get all this approved. Yeah.
Right. Daniel, do you mind showing us the pilot sketch that you saw that kind of made you go, yeah, get the tone, know what this is about?
Okay.
You all good?
Yes. Hi.
Oh, sorry, mate, not today.
No, I'm actually here for someone. Michaela?
Who's that?
Sorry, Hot Poly Girl represent 275?
My cousin Mickey. What do you want with her? Are you some undercover cop or some shit?
No, I'm not a cop, just a guy from marketing.
Toma. Yo, who is it? Apparently Stinky Feet over here is looking for Mickey. Yeah, I can smell him from all the way over there. What do you want? Are you here to pick her up for church?
No, not church. I just wanted to take her on a,
On a what?
On a date.
On a date? Mickey, on a date. What's your name?
Caleb.
What's your last name?
Smith.
Are you white?
Yes.
What's your brown?
No. Sorry, my parents are white.
Hi.
I was adopted, but I'm new in.
What do they look like?
They look like me.
Oh, what size feet are you?
Comfortable 12.
What's your favorite color?
Green, lime green.
What's that?
It's a book.
Give it.
It's for Michaela.
A book? A book for Michaela?
Yes.
So you think that Mickey's dumb?
No. It's a book of poems. She loves poems. She loves poetry.
How do you know?
Give our love a go. I don't wanna let it fade. I gave up all I have for you. I won't let you get away. Can we love like it's our last day to love? Can we dance with the moon and the skies above? Baby, can we?
Apologies, Caleb. My cousin's causing a debacle. What the hell?
Debacle? You know what? You're Russian anyway. You're ugly. And that guy that's super is uglier. You guys are both ugly. Don't come home.
Oh no, she thinks she ugly.
She's
ugly.
Yeah, I'm the pretty one in this family. No, the fuck you're not.
Daniel, can you tell us a little bit about how, when you see something like this, right? You see this, and how do you know, yeah, this is Comedy Central? Because somebody could see this and say, oh my God, this is so New Zealand, this is so Pacific, this is so local, this is so, the specificity of it, which actually I know is what makes it universal. But how do you go, yeah, we can see this as having an audience on Comedy Central?
I think for us, it's like a thing that we really focus on across MTV and Comedy Central is knowing our brand and knowing our audience. And it was kind of looking at this and thinking that definitely spoke to the audience that we have in New Zealand, and also kind of had that global appeal as well. Just kind of that, like the familyness and like friendship of it all. That's kind of something that just transcends in comedy in that sense, and goes past just having that local voice as well. And also with us as well, when we had that sketch, it wasn't just like me receiving an email. Like after I watched it, we then had a bigger group of us sitting in like our normal Comedy Central meeting as a bigger team, put that on and getting everyone else's response for it. So it was like a resounding kind of like positive response to that, which then, started going up for approvals after that. But it was definitely the whole team actually watched that and felt that it very much sat in line with other programming that we've either got from the US or the UK or other stuff we've acquired as well. It can kind of sit beside some of those other series that we've had. And so when we kind of get that, I guess, that flavor that we're looking for, that kind of makes the decision so much easier to go, yes, it's going to definitely fit in there. It's not a risk in that sense either.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Karin, this one's for you. Would you tell us a little bit about how you and, you did mention when you were introducing yourself, how you and Hanelle had met and how you knew her as a person, her aesthetic, her politics, her humanity. But can you tell us a little bit about this particular show in the kind of around this time when it was being pitched? Were you involved at that stage, or did you come on board later? Can you talk a little bit about this relationship in early days of its development?
Well, actually, Hanelle and Gabby showed me this clip. And at that point, I had just left the New Zealand Film Commission, and I sort of had producing a version as a result of working, you know, on the other side, and was basically saying no to everybody and to everything. No, I'm not doing that. I'm too burned out. I'm whatever. And they showed me that clip, and the minute I saw it, I just said yes. Yes just came out of my mouth. I didn't have really even time to think about it, because to me it just seemed, it was so fresh, it was so real. I knew that all the performers, they're like my kids, and I just thought, yeah, it's time. And as Hanelle mentioned, at the time we thought this was going to be little web bites. It was pitched as snack-sized web pieces. So it seemed like a lot of fun. It seemed like it was doable, and that there, you know, and that it was sort of a no pressure gig. It evolved into something much, much bigger during the production phase, really, and development phase. I think in many ways it was a convergence of different forces, and in particular having women of colour sitting in the decision-making chair with years and years of experience, who were able to see the merit. And Dan, across the Tasman, interesting how sometimes it takes people offshore to be able to see the merit in our programming. I do think there is perhaps some inherent structural racism around the attitude towards our local content. And so for me, it was exciting, and it was a no-brainer. So yeah, that was sort of the inception of getting involved with the project, never expecting it to. I mean, I think at some point we did realize that we probably had a hit on our hands, but in the beginning, it was just a cute little series of web pieces.
And I think it's in a way good not to know how phenomenal it's going to be right at the start, right? There's some advantage in not thinking this is going to completely be as great as it ended up being. So Hanelle, in talking about it, you'd brought us to the time of the pitch. And now, can you talk us a little bit about the creative process and the politics of the creating the writer's room that you create? Because there's a kind of a meta thing going on here. There is a writer's room in the show, but there's obviously the writer's room that you dealt with as a showrunner, as you know, the creative person behind the show. And how was that writer's room? And what was your experience? How did you go about it? What did you do to encourage new people? To preserve their mana, but also to want it to be professional, because there is that, you know, as Dana said, ultimately you can look at someone who looks like you, but it's the professionalism that you want, that you expect that they can deliver. So how did you handle all these sometimes competing forces in creating a creative team?
I think one thing I'd really like to acknowledge is, you know, in reflection, when I look back at the fact that we were intending for it to be snack-sized sketches that sat online, I often think to myself, after doing two web series, 2 seasons of it, why did I not have the vision, the courage, the belief in myself to say, hey, why don't we pitch this to television? Have we not achieved enough in this short form? And it's not to takahi, or like, it's not to downgrade web series, you know. I owe my career to making web series, but as we often know, the budgets attached to web series squash production value. And it can really limit the potential of the creatives involved, the potential of the storytelling, the potential of the global reach, just based on the fact that you don't have the production resources to support. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, because that was kind of front and center as Karin was speaking. But to your question of what it was like to put that team together, unequivocally I knew off the bat, like, this was going to be a brown writer's table. and that we were going to have different voices around the table. We were going to have, you know, Samoan voices around the table, Tongan, Niuean. We were going to have someone from an older generation. We had Shimpaula Lesi, you know, naked Samoans, you know, were the generation above us that pioneered so much space for us, and we wanted to learn from our tuakana in that way. We did reserve a very special spot on our table for Tom Sainsbury because, you know, he's someone in terms of craft that we admire. And, you know, that's a reality for us, is that, yes, we can have this vision that we want to be brown from top to bottom, but that variance of experience is not there yet in our industry. It doesn't exist. So for me, you know, I knew we needed an experienced comedy person on that table that often works in television on these types of projects. And you know, so that for me was a very special kind of specialized skill set that we needed in order for us to be inspired to rise or to you know, to grow. Iron sharpens iron. So every single person at that table was very carefully thought of in terms of what perspective they brought. And I think that's always an amazing place to start from, is to make sure that your table is diverse. And we're not talking about race, we're talking intersectionality, we're talking about sexuality, age, gender, everything. Parents, people that haven't had kids, you know, people that experience disability as part of their lived human experiences. I think these are all the things a good showrunner needs to consider when they're putting together a table. We did, you know, bring over an experienced showrunner from Australia who had experience and has a lot of experience show running, and particularly in sketch comedy. And you know, there is a culture, a cultural difference there in the way in which the work is approached, not only between Pākehā and Māori or Indigenous or Pacifica, but in Australian and New Zealand, the comedy was very different. The taste was very different. So, you know, I mean, that was, development's always hard. And I think you have to be prepared to throw things away and throw everything away at times. And, you know, we did leave that first writers' table feeling like we weren't really connected to the work in the way in which we felt. We weren't connected to the work in the way in which we were aspiring. Mm-hmm. You know, we were really aspiring to say certain things, and you know, the comedy that we had created on that initial story table for me was traditional sketch. And the thing with SIS, I believe, is that it's a very complex type of comedy. It's social, it's political, and it's very pointed in what it's trying to say. So it's not slapstick. It's much more sophisticated, in my opinion. So we had to go back to the drawing board, and because, you know, we'd flown back our showrunner at that point, I really had to step up, and you know, and we had to, you know, pull together whatever resources we could and start that process all over again. And it was interesting for me to see, you know, what came of that next lot, that next phase of storylining. And, you know, I'd come up with the idea originally, like we knew structurally we needed a through line. That SIS works in 2 layers. You have the sketch, little short comedy, bite-sized pieces, which are about these 3 cousins, these fictional cousins, these best friends. But we needed a through line that connected it all together. And, you know, again, going back to that whole corridor around story sovereignty, it's something that I find myself and all of my brown industry friends talking about on a weekly basis. we're looking at all of these funding announcements that are being made, and we're looking at the projects that are being funded at that top tier $5 to $7 million tier, and we're looking at it and we're going, why are these white Pākehā producers getting millions of dollars to make our stories? And then we're talking about who of our friends are actually working on those projects. We're talking about the cultural safety or the lack of cultural safety, you know, and right through until when these projects actually land on our television screens, and the inauthentic, you know, misrepresentation, the stereotypes of our people that are continuously perpetuated as a result of these Pākehā producers making and telling our stories. And, you know, Tom already, you know, his particular comedy is around really speaking to that middle class Pākehā audience and highlighting problematic things, whether they're aware or not. I would like to think that Tom is kind of nudging them, and well, we just thought he's the perfect talent, and we all got together and I said, you know, this through line, let's look at the politics of a writer's room, because it can be just as juicy and dramatic sometimes, as we all know, as writers. And together, myself and that ensemble of comedians and actors, you know, we came up with the initial storyline, the initial through line of that writer's room. So yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah. Just quickly to understand, so the person who'd come to as a showrunner from Australia, did you cease to work with them by the time that you kind of said, no, this is not going to work, we need to do it ourselves? Is that the correct representation?
Well, yes, but mainly, I mean, budget helped that decision a lot. You know, it's not expensive getting someone that experienced, and you know, this still to some degree was not a mainstream budget. But the other thing as well is, once I had stepped into that position as a story producer and we had to do that second lot of storylining, I just realized yet again, why did I have this internalized idea of myself that I wasn't good enough to run my own table? You know, I literally had you know, gone through that whole process of getting the funding and pitching and this and that. Was I not the right person? Like, what was it about me that I had I wasn't even a thought to myself, you know, that I would be the best person for that job. And again, it talks to the way in which we as brown people, you know, we internalize the reflected perception of not being smart enough, not being good enough, not being experienced enough, you know. And I mean, I think at that point, it was just like, the job has to get done, and there was no better person for the job. And even though we went all the way around to arrive to that, I still wouldn't change it, because now I've finally, you know, 6 years into my career, realized I don't need to hire another story producer or showrunner to make my television series. I can do it myself, you know.
And in this process, I'm not sure, it's a question I'm interested in, commissioners sometimes are quite involved in development. They keep an eye on development. Sometimes it's more hands-off. How was it like with the two of you, Dana and Annie? Were you aware of what was going on, or were you like, no, we completely trust her? And I'm not saying that your awareness would have meant that you didn't trust her. I'm just curious about the process. How, you know, how involved were you through this development phase?
We were fairly hands off, to be honest. We trusted Hanelle. You know, we set up the foundations with her to you know, ensure she would succeed. And we knew it wouldn't be easy. Production never is. There's always ups and downs. And you know, as a commissioner, you do develop a fairly good sixth sense at reading between the lines of emails and producers' reports and you do hear talk too, you know, so we're not as isolated in our Mount Wellington Tower as people think we are. We do, you know, we've got a fair idea of what's going on, but we trusted that Hanelle would find her way through, and of course she did.
The reason I ask is I think the point Hanelle makes is such a valid one about what is it that makes someone go, I made a really successful, you know, web series, but I still need to kind of think small, or think that I need somebody else to kind of validate what I'm doing, or somebody, you know, a slightly bigger name. I don't, you know, all these things that make you kind of, and as you talk about internalizing your place. And I was saying this, to Amy Mills at New Zealand On Air not so long ago, that it's this thing about, you know, you want a seat at the table and they put you on a child's table, they put you on the kids' table, and then nobody's telling you that you've actually outgrown the kids' table. Please come to the adult table. Nobody says, actually, there's now, you know, so you're just at the kids' table, you've outgrown the kids' table. There are very young kids who are looking at you going, my God, you're taking away my high chair. And you sit there and say, I don't want to be in this high chair. Actually, I want to be sitting somewhere else. And yet we find, Hanelle, and that we seek that permission to be part of the adult table, as against just, you know, kicking off a chair and telling someone, you've been warming that chair for so long, move your ass, I need to sit here. And it's something that's systemic. This is not about individuals and personalities. It is systemic. And until we actually deal with it at the systemic level, I think we are only going to be relying on the goodness of good people. And I think we need to be thinking about change beyond the goodness of good people. You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's amazing it worked out for you, Hanelle. That I'm so happy that you kind of just took stock and you had the support and you said, no, I can do this myself. You know, why am I going? But what if you were not surrounded by supportive people? Why should you be part of a system that put you there in the first place, is the question that I want to pose to this panel for a little bit as a kind of a detour. And then we'll again come back to the creative process with SIS. And anyone, you know, I'm happy for you to just put your hand up. I'm not asking. Yep, please, Annie, thank you.
Yeah, so the thing, Dana and I had a good talk about this morning. And the thing of getting from the child's table to the adult's table is, I see a real responsibility on commissioners and funders actually to step up there and to identify talent and work hard to do that. Don't be lazy about it. Get out there and find them. Don't just keep commissioning from the same people. And also to back our talent, you know, in the way that we have with Hanelle. And, you know, unquestioningly, really, we came in behind her and provided the resources she was going to need. And, you know, it wasn't easy on the funding and commissioning side, and it shouldn't be that hard. But it's really bloody hard. And, you know, the process you have to go through as a commissioning platform, and for Hanelle and others like her, not that there are many like her, but the process is really grueling. And there's this continual questioning and justifying that doesn't happen with others. And the only way I can describe that is a structural problem. Shuchi, you're right. It's a structurally racist problem. And we need to collectively work on that. We need to fix that. We need to stop it. Yeah. So as commissioners, I see our responsibility is to ask really hard questions of people coming with stories to ensure that they understand the responsibility of telling that story, to make them really question themselves as to whether it's their story to tell, and to ask some really tough questions. And we're having some really tough conversations with producers at the moment around this stuff. So it's things like, you know, who's in the story, who's telling the story, who's missing from the story, and most importantly, and we don't talk enough about this one, who benefits from the story. And by that I mean, who's making the money here? So when you take on a story that comes from another culture, or that includes other cultures that are not your own, or other misrepresented or underrepresented groups, think really hard about how you are going to include those groups and ensure that the seat they have at the table is a seat of equal power, and that the sharing of the benefits of that project is shared equally and fairly. Because we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is an entitled taking of stories, and not enough questioning by commissioning platforms and not enough questioning by funders.
Very, very, very good point, Annie, and very well articulated. The responsibility is for all three, you know, for creatives, as in the writer-directors or pitching projects, to producers who either come on board or commission projects, and for funding bodies, both in terms of, you know, broadcasters and funders like New Zealand On Air, New Zealand Film Commission, among others. There's this lovely quote, I think, from Benjamin Law, who writes family law in Australia. And he talks a lot about how, why are power structures monocolored, you know, monocultural? And if you think about, you know, said if you think about a workplace or an institution, you would not want everyone to be the same gender, everyone to be the same, you know, ethnicity, or everyone. And we need to break that up. And I like what he says. If we were to actually apply that idea that we don't want people to be, you know, mono in a working place, it would mean different looking teams and boards all across Australian, and we can say New Zealand, networks, including SBS's leadership team, ABC executive, ABC board. It takes a generation to be able to take the next generation with them. But in the meantime, gatekeepers need to work harder to stop excluding so many people. And I think, you know, that's the change needs to happen at all these tiers. And otherwise, we are always going to be thinking, well, maybe I'll make this and, you know, I will subvert the commercial, I mean, as in networks, and do it on YouTube. And I'm not denigrating those who do it on YouTube. YouTube can give you incredible eyeballs. But the trouble is, at the moment, we can't go to New Zealand On Air and say, give us money to take something to YouTube. At least not yet, and we are very hoping that those things change. We still have certain channels, and if those channels are full of blockages, then it's as you said, a systemic problem. So it's so wonderful to hear, Annie, that you're asking these questions of the projects that come to you. And Hanelle, I know you want to say something, and I'm very keen to hear it.
Yeah, I think I just really want the opportunity to table the fact that we must not forget that this country is founded on a partnership, on Te Tiriti o Waitangi. There is a founding legal document that actually requires everybody to enter into this partnership. And so, yes, while it's monocultural, you know, we have a founding document that actually demands that tangata whenua be treated as an equal partner. And so if we cannot at that level understand the partnership, the legal partnership between Māori and Pākehā, there is no room for diversity to begin. And that's where it needs to start.
Absolutely. And with that partnership, Hanelle, that partnership is at many levels. It's not a partnership. It's, you know, we find people who say, oh, I collaborated, or I consulted, I took you into the room, I took you, but true partnership is really about sharing power. Then that power could be economic, that power could be, you know, something else. And I do want to talk about economic power and take this back to Karin, because I know, you know, a few weeks out of election, my God, you know, dared we be term Marxists and talk about access to means of production. But I think it's really important. And Karin, I know you have strong thoughts about this. We've, you know, talked about it in other fora. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think when we talk about power and when we talk about means of production, yes, we are talking about representation. Yes, we are talking about who's looking through the lens. Yes, we are talking about authentic stories. But for me, the bottom line is economic. And I didn't think this up. Barry Barclay thought it up 30 years ago when he talked about exactly the same problem. some of the same people who 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago were receiving millions of dollars from government funders to make screen projects about Māori and Pacific people, are still doing that. 8 of the top 10 New Zealand box office films are stories about Māori and Pacific people, but only a couple of them are actually owned by Māori people. And those are the films of Taika Waititi, who was mentored by Merita Meta. So, you know, I want to acknowledge those who have come before us, who went to the barricades and fought to even get a little tiny piece of the pie. But here we are 30 years later, still having this conversation. Why are we still having this conversation in 2020, you know, when people are marching all around the world? So a true collaboration means giving up power, as you've said, Shuchi and Annie. It means sharing not only the creative decision-making, but it means sharing the funding and the profits. And there are screen producers and major production companies in this country that have made millions and millions of dollars making stories that they claim are New Zealand stories, and they claim that they have the right to tell, which to me is just a classic example of entitlement. These are actually the stories of our ancestors, our forebears, our culture, our people, and to take those stories and to profit from them without consultation or with mere box ticking, because that's the other thing we're looking at right now, is unacceptable. It's unacceptable in 2020. And, you know, it really needs to be called out, and it really needs to stop. At this very moment, as Hanelle says, in Aotearoa, we have major feature films, multi-million-dollar feature films funded by the New Zealand Film Commission, major television series about icons of New Zealand, of Māori history and Pacific history, being run by all white male creatives, the producers, directors, and writers who are the owners of the IP and the contracts, and the profits are not Indigenous. And I really think that we need to be looking at this from a policy level, that our public funders need to be really re-examining their policies at a board level, and that we really need to be not putting the responsibility on Hanelle to have to beg for crumbs and to go out to the barricades as a young woman, but on the policymakers, on our elected representatives, on our chief executives of all of these agencies. Systemic change, as you say, happens from the top. And it is about economic power. You know, let's be honest about this. This is making money off the backs of Indigenous people. It has to stop.
And you're so right that we cannot be having the same conversations again and again. This is the part that breaks my heart. I think I was saying this to some of you yesterday, that when we made 1,000 Apologies as kind of an Asian show about racism and being Asian 10 years ago, we were so hoping it'd be outdated. You should never make a show about racism that is just equally relevant 10 years later. That's pathetic. That just makes you feel, oh my God, you know, you rejoice in thinking in that moment that you've done something really politically important. You've said something that'll change it. You've moved the dial, and nothing. So, you know, we all want this to happen, and we often hear from people who are more powerful than us that they want it to happen too. Then what do you think is not happening? How can people up there say to us that actually we want this to happen? We know we want it to happen. So very simple question, why isn't it happening? Dana.
I think it's about priorities, you know, and prioritizing our voices, and giving us the money to give voice to our ideas. And it doesn't feel like we're there yet. And as Annie says, and as Karin says, you know, from the top down, we need to get to the top, and we need to all get on the same page. And we're not there yet, but with projects like this, we're getting there. I truly believe that we are going to get there. It's just the banging your head against a brick wall is challenging, and a lot of us give up. And that's the thing, you know, we've got to stick in there and keep going, because that's the hardest thing, I think, actually. And probably for you, Karin, you've probably felt similarly as a producer, that thing of, you know, maybe it's just easy to give up, but we can't. And I think that's what inspired me with SIS. It really has invigorated me, and Annie and I have talked about this. It's invigorated both of us to keep pushing for projects like this and creatives like this.
Thank you, Dana. Hanelle, I have a question for you. You know, when humor is what makes you laugh. Humor is what you giggle about things. You know it. It's not like a little treatise that, oh, humor is you know, it makes you laugh. And yet humor is a thing that people have most arguments about, because people would always go, oh, but who are you making this for? Who's your audience? And you go, I'm making it for my people. I know who this is going to work. Did you have this space of utter confidence that the humor of SIS was primarily for the people that you were making this show for, but would also resonate for a larger audience? Or did you go, you know what, I don't care about that other audience. It's speaking to the people I want to speak to. What was your, you know, sense of the funny in SIS?
Oh yeah, 100%. I never, I think there's a interview that Mirata did, and she said, I make no bones about the fact that I do not make my films for non-Māori. I am Māori, you know. I make my films about my lived experience, you know. I'm paraphrasing, but you know, she goes on to mention that everything is made for white people. Why can't we just have one or two things that are made for us? And you know, that's exactly how I feel. You know, I don't see things on TV or in the cinema. I don't see projects that reflect me and my friends, me and my cousins, me and my family, my whānau. And for me, I was brought up with all boys. And you know, me and my boy cousins, we roast each other a lot, and you know, we're very humorous, we're very, very funny people. And whenever I make anything, I genuinely think, is my cousin Juani or is my cousin Hori gonna love this? Because at the end of the day, when my people feel seen, when they feel validated and authentically represented on screen, that to me matters more than any critical review, than any award, than any mainstream success. I'm a mother, and I want to leave this world better than when I came into it. I want to leave this world knowing that my daughter has brown women on screen that she can see herself in. I grew up in an era where Charmed and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and you know, Party of Five, Roswell, those were all the shows that I grew up with. That was my pop culture. None of those shows had brown women, let alone brown or even black people, and plus they're American. And so for me, when I started creating work, it was literally just about wanting to see ourselves as everyday normal parts of society, you know, and particularly as a young Māori woman and as a mother, I really wanted to break away from the damaging, trauma-driven narratives that have continued to be made in New Zealand, you know, and I just wanted to see young, successful brown women, you know, I just wanted to see a reflection of us. That was it. And so when I create, I never think of what the fuck mainstream wants. I don't care. they've got literally they've got entire streaming services dedicated to them. Why can't we just have these one or two, or, you know, we should have more, but, you know, this is for us, this is for my people, and especially for our young girls, for our young wahine out there.
Thank you, Hanelle. I'm going to take this idea to Danielle, because obviously I completely understand as a person of color what Hanelle is talking about, but I also know that, you know, when you guys sit around the table, you're not going, this show is going to be for the Pacifica audience or Maori audience or the Asian audience on Comedy Channel. How do you make these choices and calculated risks with confidence that this show actually will translate, even though that may not be the intent of the team that made it? Because, for, you know, obviously I know what Hanelle is saying in terms of politically and culturally and emotionally remaining true to your content. But how do you flip from there to the decisions that go around your table?
For us, like, as much as this definitely, of course, has a really strong local voice, I think it's when you're looking at the sketches in themselves, they have these universal themes that transcend just what the local audience at home. Yes, you're seeing yourself on screen, but it's also talking about issues that everyone would speak about. There's stuff about sexual health, sexuality. There's other things that, you know, in like what we're talking about at the moment, like what you're saying, there's people marching around the world right now and there's racial profiling going on, and you see that in the supermarket sketch. And as much as you might be this person that sees that happening, you ignore it, it is something that's going on, and that's actually, you're seeing it on screen. So there are these like issues that everyone has seen in their life or has dealt with in particular ones, but as much as it's in a different voice to you, you're still having the same experience at a lot of the time. And I think that was kind of what drew us to SIS as well, that we did say initially, like, push the boundaries with this show. That's what I guess Comedy Central, especially in the US, is known for, having shows that kind of have dealt with issues that haven't been spoken about before. Like Broad City was meant to be groundbreaking in that way, and Key and Peele as well. They dealt with things that other shows hadn't talked about yet. And I feel like SIS definitely had that flavor and that tone of voice that we went, yes, this will fit on Comedy Central because this is something that's pushing and doing something no one else is. And I think that's what makes the decision easier for us, when we're like, yes, we see these themes, everyone's going to relate to that. Yes, it's in a local voice, but at the end of the day, it's still funny. And that's what makes it easy for us.
Right. Because, I mean, you know, comedy is the safest way to be dangerous, isn't it? Like, comedy is such a great way to be dangerous, but it's a safe way to be dangerous because you can include somebody in that laugh, in that kind, in the way that interpolates you without feeling that you're not always the butt of the joke. And also, Hanelle, something in terms of, I think one of the reviewers who talked about your work had said that, you know, that she was so used to seeing fragmented characterization because you only get bits, right? And she said, I was so nervous about watching SIS because I'm so used to seeing myself on screen as a fragmented character. And it was so lovely to see fully rounded people, three-dimensional people. And you have cleverly, I think very cleverly, taken those positions by having different positions in the writer's room of SIS. So, you know what I mean? There's a kind of a very clever way in which you're anticipating the multifaceted discourse, even among people of color, right? That people would say, oh, this is not me, this is me, this is, and you've taken the kind of multiple positions by placing these three very different writers in the writer's room led by Tom. So there was a kind of a clever way of including an audience that may potentially feel excluded. And I think there's another bit somewhere where you talked about the notes that you used to get and how you use those notes to always sometimes bring in the kind of question the audience may ask, and put that in so that if the audience is going to ask that, maybe one of your characters can ask that, and that way you're including that dissenting voice as against excluding that dissenting voice. And I think these are very beautiful ways of a dynamic process of writing that takes into account not just people who think like us, but people from our communities who may not necessarily think like us, that we do want to hail and include in a conversation. And maybe it was a scene with the kava bowl. Do you want to address that a little bit, one of you? What had happened in terms of, you know, that particular note? And how that you included that in a scene, because I find that, you know, those kinds of details really speak to a culture of safety, collaboration, faith, and kind of, you know, trust between EPs and producers and writers and commissioners.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because when we first, myself, Destiny and Maya are both Samoan. When we were brainstorming about sketch ideas, you know, obviously we wanted to pay homage again to all of the films that we'd grown up watching, and I think one of our references was just body swap as a genre, and off of that, you know, we knew right away that we wanted a sketch that looked at gender inequality between brown women and brown men. Obviously that genre already throws up that magic of sorts needs to be used, a potion or whatnot. And we were also, in a separate sketch, we wanted to look at what happens when we fuck with tradition or culture as young people who sometimes don't understand the original intention of the way in which our tupuna, our ancestors, did things. So we chucked those two things together and we came up with the Carver Bowl sketch. And when we initially sent the draft in, we got the note back that, you know, that Carver is a sacred tradition that shouldn't be fucked with. And we thought, well, that's the point of what we were trying, that's why they get punished, that's why they body swap. Karin, our EP, obviously was also, you know, helping us navigate those notes. And she said, well, me and, you know, the men in my family, they drink it as a casual thing in the garage. They get together and they casually talanoa around, you know, around Carver. And so what I was observing were two Pacific women who had two very different connections, well, four very different points of view around what Carver meant to them and their whānau. And as we were kind of, you know, playing with, like, how are we going to apply this note? Because Dana was very much like, this is not, you know, this is not something you play with. And, you know, that it was just everyone's points of view were very clear, which was amazing, because just like women, just like our points of view as women all vary, our points of view as brown people all vary. And we thought, well, why can't we just add that, you know, complication? Because as we know, great writing is about conflict. And so if you have a character, and what we did was we literally just put the notes in the words of one of the lead characters, and we just had her saying, like, we shouldn't be fucking with this, you know, this is really like sacred stuff, you know, and she's not really sure about it. You know, I think then you have an opportunity to unpack all these different perspectives within your piece. And yeah, and I think it ended up, you know, actually really elevating the sketch, that note. So yeah, it was a great example of a constructive note that came from lived experience, and you know, it just really sharpened the sophistication of the writing.
And you can't do that. You could do this because you had 4 characters. Can you imagine if you have like a show where there's one token brown person? There's no multiplicity of brownness possible when you have the one brown friend, or the one, you know, sidekick, or the one funny one in the you know, ensemble. And I've always kind of, you know, regretted this so much. And I love that line from Aziz Ansari's one of his, you know, Master of None, where he says, why can't you have 2 Indians? Why? And the whole thing is about, no, we can only have one. And it's that thing about that multiplicity that we seek, the dimensionality that we seek, what we see around us, we rarely get a chance to represent in our work, because we're often reduced to the, you know, to the spice that flavors up the dish, the one thing. So I really appreciated that kind of plurality in the writing, which allowed for different ways to be brown also possible? Because I think that's equally important if you talk about inclusive storytelling. We've got about 15-20 minutes to take questions. So if you have any questions, please send them through the Q&A, and I will ask them to our panelists. You can have specific questions, or you could just have, I think there was a question here, Dan, for you about the reception outside New Zealand for SIS. And can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think just to preface it with SIS, when we originally commissioned it with Prime and Sky, that it could only be licensed like as the full version in New Zealand on on TV, but then on digital we had it available for Australia and New Zealand. So the whole special itself was only across those two regions. Having said that, though, we sent on the project to our UK team, who are kind of like our international heads, and there was a lot of interest from their side as well. So when we were doing our promotional support for SIS in the lead up to its launch, the UK page, which has got millions of followers, shared one of the supermarket sketch and everything on the day of launch, and there was a few other pieces of content that kind of hit our audiences outside of Australia and New Zealand as well from our social pages. So we definitely saw that pick up in the social elements that we put out there, but we did see it had great results both across Australia and New Zealand as well as an original series. But yeah, there was definitely interest from our international parts of the business. We had people from America asking like, oh, what is this? Like, tell us more about it. And then we also had like a South African channel that we have as well going, oh, this is great. Like, we need to know more about it kind of thing. So it's definitely, and then like, obviously the, like, what do you call it? What we want to do with it is make more of it. So that's everyone's kind of interested in the next round of like, what's going to happen with this. So there's definitely interested parties that it's caught the attention of all over the world now, which has been great. So.
Thank you so much. Hanelle, there's a question here where someone wants to talk a little bit more about process. And I know you've discussed the writer's room. Can you talk a little bit about the directorial process?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I had a directing partner, Licky Jackson Burke, and Licky has is a long-time friend and also a long-time collaborator on, other things, but Licky hasn't transitioned or hadn't transitioned yet to directing for screen. So he's very well respected in the theatre space, and just that desire to grow an industry where I have contemporaries that also make work, so that the burden of representation for the young Pacific Māori voice doesn't always land on me. It was like, I've been kind of yanked him into doing some screen stuff for a while. So this was really the perfect opportunity. And I know that some people on our crew were really nervous about, how's it going to work with two directors, essentially. And so Licky really was my backbone. He was my partner in that whole period, and especially because I was heavily pregnant. I was 6 to 7 months pregnant, and so you can imagine like going back and forth between set and to the actors was going to be a lot for me. And so right from pre-production and right through to the shoot, Licky and I just quickly identified where our strengths were. We moved as one unit through all of the HOD meetings, the rehearsals, and we just really played to strengths. Licky choreographed all of the kind of the dancing, everything around that on screen, but he primarily looked after those actors, and really was my, for my actors, was really their support person, and they really lent on him, and I really lent on him for performance. And then obviously having a lot of television directing credits, I was technically a lot more experienced, and so myself and my DP definitely had the kind of closer communication, but Licky was there through everything in terms of shot listing and location rickies and tech rickies, where we'd talk about where we were setting up the camera and everything, and it was such a beautiful moment in that supermarket. because it had been a week of shooting by that point, and it was such a beautiful moment, like blocking out the scene, and me and Drew, the DP, talking about coverage, and Lecky going, oh, you know, when we were shortlisting, is that when you guys drew that thing? Is that, you know, when you talked about this particular tracking shot? And I was like, yes. And he was like, that's so buzzy, like, you know, and that for me, like, that's why I do what I do, like, because, you know, knowledge should be shared, and it was so meaningful to me to be able to, you know, often directors want to come and shadow, and so it's just like a visit on set, but
Yeah.
I really believe that if you're committed to being a director or to directing your own stuff and you need the experience, actually, for me personally, the real directing takes place in pre-production. It's when you're breaking down your scripts, it's when you're making your casting decisions, it's when you're making your shot list, when you're talking about tone and you're talking about lighting and tech and everything. That's directing to me. On set, when you're actually, you know, on the day when you're there, that's all of your preparation coming into play, you know, all the work's being done. So yeah, I mean, the process on SIS was unique because with Gabby, Lecky and the two writers, it was all capacity building. And so on one hand, we're doing a job, on one hand, we're directing a show, but on the other hand, you know, there was a capacity building, a tuakana taina building component there. And so how do we hold space as people? And this is what I have a real problem with in this country, is this attachment of young talent and this non-reciprocity. You know, if you're going to take a intern producer on, it is a reciprocal thing. They're not your PA, they're not your bum boy, they're not someone to go and take your dog to the vet. That is not what you're getting funding to do. You are getting funding to actually meaningfully engage and mentor this person so that once they leave your project, they can go make their own shit. And you know, I'm so blessed that I had people like Karin and Sima, because they truly invested in me. And now I have Annie and Dana. You know, these are people that truly meaningfully invest into you as a new filmmaker, as an emerging filmmaker. And that's what we need to see more of, because what I'm seeing across the board, when I look across to all my mates on these big productions, they're being exploited and they're being used and they're being attached. It's a box ticking, tokenistic exercise. And it really needs to stop, you know. That didn't answer your question, it answered something else, but I'm glad I got it off my chest.
No, you did, and that was important too, but you did talk about your co-directing process, and that is important because it is, you know, it is always a bit of a, how do you co-direct? How do two directors, it's so much about the vision of one director, and how do you, so I'm sure the person who asked that question found it useful. Yeah. Annie and Dana, there's a question for you saying, when will Annie and Dana be next taking applications to pitch? I have a web series that I've created covering diversity, mental health and addiction recovery, and I have completed a pilot episode. Smile, there is something for you to see. Is there a good time for them to come to you, or as they say, when are you taking applications for pitches next?
We're always open, so the best way to get your idea through is probably through our Sky Originals email address. So you could send a 2-pager letting us know about your idea to skyoriginals@sky, no, what is it, Annie? skyoriginals@sky.co.nz.
I think it might be sky.originals.
Sky.originals.
Yeah.
Yeah, at sky.co.nz, and just send it through and we'll be in touch.
We're getting close to that time and we have to wrap up. So individually, things that are practical tips something that someone can go, oh my God, I should remember to do that the next time I'm either pitching, or the next time I'm, working with a writer, or the next time that I'm trying to get international company involved in my work, or the next time I'm seeking an EP because, my God, I'm young and I can never get anything across the line without a good EP. Everyone wants an EP. All these questions. So one by one, any kind of, clear tips that you could give for those in the audience who might be seeking that information. And we can start with Daniel.
From my perspective, I would say kind of from this example of SIS itself as well, having that pilot episode was just such a helpful thing to get that over the line, to like hear a tone of voice, see something that's stylistically, in that world. Having said that as well, I understand people don't have the budget that maybe Hanelle had set aside for this. So with that though, like we're consuming content on all different platforms now, and it does not have to be the most HD quality or that kind of thing. If you've got a certain tone of voice that you're going for that you can capture in some way, that's always good to put with your 2-page pitch or something, just to actualize that idea. And that kind of gives such a better sense and a better flavor for someone looking at words on a page. It brings it to life so much better for us. So I would just say any attempt that you can do with people around you that can support you, friends that are talented, either producing or editing, whatever, anyone that can help you to put something together, so that when you're putting in front of people like us or Sky or NZ On Air, it's just good to have that reference point. And I think that just gives you a leg up when you're doing this process, for sure.
Thank you. Karin, do you have something?
Yeah, I think Dana and Annie both mentioned that when Hanelle and Gabby pitched SIS, their pitch was very professional. It was rehearsed and it was confident. And when I saw their application, frankly, it was one of the best applications I've ever seen. It was beautifully presented. It was beautifully thought out. And it was spelled correctly. People hate me because I'm a grammar Nazi, but please, if you're going to submit things to funders, to networks, to commissioners, make sure it looks good. And for goodness sake, check your spelling. You'd be shocked and horrified at how many people submit things that are riddled with typos and grammatical errors. If you can't do it, get somebody who can.
Thank you. Dana, do you have a tip?
Probably picking up on what Karin said, absolutely. And also realizing that, we're in it together. So, we want to work together with you. When we're commissioning a show, we want the very best for your project. We want as many people watching your wonderful work as possible. And it's very much a collaboration. And I think that was the wonderful thing working with Hanelle and Karin, is that there was a lot of trust, and actually coming to the table with trust is very important, because you need to trust that your idea is safe with us, and trust that we have the best intentions for your baby, really. And I think trust is probably what got this over the line so beautifully, between Daniel and Sky Prime. We worked very, very well together, and there was trust there, and the same between Karin and Hanelle and us. So that's probably my advice.
Annie?
A really practical thing: watch the platform, watch what you're pitching to, know what they've got, know where there might be a gap. Look at the funding decisions and see what's in production. Get a real feel for what that commissioner might want. And one of the worst questions a commissioner can hear is, so what are you looking for? It's a really lazy question, and it shows that you haven't done your research. So do your research. And the beauty of Prime and Sky is that we have many platforms. So there's a chance that what you're pitching may work for one of them, but it really helps if you come knowing, where it might fit. So there's that, and also keep it brief initially. If you don't have the resource to shoot something, and not everybody does, just a paragraph really in the first instance, or a page, is enough. Don't spend heaps of time and money on a big piece of work, when, you know, we might say, look, we've already got that, or we've already declined that 3 times this year, or something similar. So keep it really short and concise, and just send an email in the first place, and we'll give you some feedback. If we're interested, then we'll have a chat.
Thank you. Hanelle, from you.
I just wanted to say, firstly, even though we had money or we had the resources to shoot the pilot for SIS, back when I started, you know, my very first short film I did out of film school, The Promise of Piha, we crowdfunded that, and we got $3,000 or $4,000, and we shot it over 3 or 4 days. And again, with the Baby Mamas Club pilot, that was self-funded for maybe $1,500 or two grand over a 2-day shoot. And we hustled our asses off. I don't come from money. I've got young children. You know, I definitely don't have any economic resource. When I first started, I was definitely going, you know, I was funding things or going out there and doing a boosted or a pledge me. These are all, in my opinion, privileges afforded to us that people like Merata and Barry did not have. So I personally think it's a lazy excuse to say, oh, well, I don't have the money to shoot something. You know, there are so many ways to find the money. And at the end of the day, if you're a producer, that's going to be your job anyway. So if you can't find a couple grand, you know, and you're going to go and ask for 500,000 or $1 million or whatever, you know, be a producer, go hustle for that money and get something made. Because even when, you know, when we were trying to mood board for Baby Mamas Club, there were no pictures of Māori and Pacific women that we could use for our mood board. We got together a couple $100. We got a great photographer that we didn't know. We reached out to him on Instagram. We said, we love your work. This is our kaupapa. We've got no money. Will you support us? And he said yes. And that's how we got our initial imagery for the Baby Mamas Club prop. So where there's a will, there's a way. Secondly, my second tip would be watch local content. Watch everything and anything that's coming out of the industry. Know your market, know your industry, and read the credits. I found Drew McGeorge, our DOP, because I loved my friend Roseanne Liang's short film, Do No Harm. And I asked her to intro us because I could just see visually that's where I wanted SIS to be, at that level. I'd also watched Stallone's films and Hibiscus and Ruthless and Three Wise Cousins, and I loved the way that it was cut. I thought the timing and the comedy was perfect. So again, you read the credits, and that's where I found Jack Woon, and I reached out to him and I said, I love the way that you cut. Will you consider this project? So really get to know your industry and get to know who's out there technically, not just producers and EPs and writers, technically who's out there, because that's why the production value of SIS looks so good. There was a third point, but I've forgotten it, but I think those are 2 great tips anyway.
Thank you so much. And if all of us can unmute our mics, because I do really want to give Hanelle a round of applause. She has achieved something amazing, and in her humility, I know she always talks about everybody else who was involved, but I think what she's pulled off is spectacular, and she's off on such an incredible journey. So Hanelle, thank you very, very much for being the voice and being the force that you've been. And I do want to thank SPADA. I also want to kind of reach out to the audience and say that, you know, sometimes masterclasses are very much about craft, and they're great. And that's actually usually the masterclasses that we encourage. But occasionally masterclasses have to go bigger into talking about philosophy. And so if you felt, my God, you know, I didn't get to learn enough about how Nell dealt with improvisation or how she dealt with, I'm sure there'll be other fora, and maybe we'll get Hanelle to do some recordings in her endless free time, and put them up. But I think for Hanelle, this philosophical discussion was important. For SIS, it was important. For Annie and Dana and Karin, and for Dan, it was important. So thank you very much for coming to this with such openness and trust. And thank you, SPADA. Kakiti.